Jesus spoke about John the Baptist, he asked a multi-layered question. When you went into the wilderness, what is it that you saw? What is it, a weak reed? Or was it a man in luxury? No, but a prophet. And actually more than a prophet. In today's message, we're going to discuss how John's ministry revealed the kingdom and while his role was more important than the prophets before him. Yes, I said prophets before him. Today we're coming from the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 7 through 9. And this is what it reads. And John's disciples were leaving. Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. What did you go on to the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out and see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in kings' palaces. Then what did you go out and see? A prophet. Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. So Jesus said John the Baptist was a prophet and more than a prophet. Let's discuss this. After addressing the close, intimate circle of John, after addressing the students of John, after addressing the disciples of John, Jesus turns to the crowd. See, what Jesus is about to reveal to the people is not just for the disciples to know. It's for the masses to know. Because he's going to talk about the significance of John the Baptist, while he's also setting the stage for the significance of you. An opportunity was presented to Jesus in this moment, and he seized it. He seized this moment to address the crowd and clarifies John's true identity and his mission. You see, John was not a weak, unstable figure who was swayed by the wind, who let the circumstances and the situations of the time and let the people sway him and knock him off of his faith. John was not a weak reed in the wilderness, nor was he a figure who was enticed by worldly luxury or political powers. Notice I said worldly luxury and worldly political power. Instead, John was connected to something. John had the revelation. John was a prophet, standing firm like a statue in the wilderness, proclaiming God's word boldly. What did John proclaim boldly in the wilderness? The kingdom is coming. The kingdom is coming. Prepare your hearts and the minds. The kingdom is coming because the kingdom of heaven has arrived. More than that, John was the final prophet of the old order. Or let me put it like this. John had one foot in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. He was the one that bridged the gap from the Old Testament across the intertestamental period, which is the 400 years in between the two testaments. He was the one that bridged the gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. He was the prophet, the final prophet of all of the prophets. But he had a very important role, a significant role. That's why Jesus said he was a prophet, but more than a prophet. Because yes, he proclaimed the coming of the Messiah, but he was actually able to introduce him to the people. I don't know about you, but John the Baptist was he was presenting Jesus to the people. Therefore, we must continue to present Jesus to the people. John the Baptist didn't present himself to the people. He presented Jesus to the people. Are you presenting Jesus to the people, or are you presenting your church to the people? Whew. Are you presenting Jesus to the people, or are you presenting your denomination to the people? Watch this. Are you presenting Jesus to the people, or are you presenting yourself to the people? What are you proclaiming boldly? Are you soliciting church members, or are you soliciting people to the kingdom? There is a difference. While also acting as a herald who prepared the way for the Messiah. Jesus was in the John the Baptist was in the Old Testament, proclaiming all the way. You, you know when you're in a wilderness and they have mountains around you, and then you scream very loudly, your voice begins to echo, and it begins to reflect off of the different objects. There's no noise pollution. There's no pollution, right? So you projecting your voice, and it's just like hello, 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 hello. Just think about this: John the Baptist in the Old Testament projecting it to the New. Now, by asking rhetorical questions, Jesus leads the crowd to recognize that John was not ordinary. His ministry was very important and necessary. This passage reveals several kingdom truths. Watch this. Number one, steadfastness in the kingdom. John was no reed swayed by the wind. He stood firm, unmoved by public opinion or pressure. True kingdom leaders are rooted in conviction, not swayed by unstable cultural tides. I didn't say ties, I said tides. Unstable cultural tides. Like the water, the tide in the water rises and goes down, rises and goes down. He wasn't swayed by the temperature of the culture. He didn't have to check the temperature of the people because his temperature was rooted in the Father. Number two, the kingdom versus worldly power. John wore no fine clothes and had no royal position. The kingdom does not advance through wealth, status, or expensive buildings, but through obedience and prophetic witness. Number three, prophetic fulfillment. He sure did fulfill his obligation. John embodies what it meant to be a prophet, but watch this, but he also surpasses that. His ministry was not just foretelling, but directly preparing the way for the king. The herald goes before the king to prepare the way. The herald actually goes forth and ensures that the path is straight, the path is clean. There's no obstructions, there's no potholes, there's no boulders, no rocks in the way. It's going to be a smooth path. That's what John did. He was a prophet, but he also acted as a herald to go before the king to prepare the way for the way. That's good. Number four, the wilderness as the kingdom stage. John's setting in the wilderness symbolized repentance and renewal, echoing the story of Israel. The kingdom does not appear from halls of power structures of the world, but from the margins calling people back to God. Watch this. Jesus' testimony about John highlights how the kingdom disrupts worldly expectations. I'm going to say that again. The testimony that Jesus gave in regards to John shows and illustrates and demonstrates by what John did and what he did that the kingdom disrupts worldly expectations. The people may have looked for a political connected person or someone very impressive socially. See, the people were looking for someone who was politically connected. They were looking for someone to come out of the ranks. They were looking for someone who looked like them, talked like them, but had a higher status than them. They wasn't looking in the wilderness for Jesus to come. See, if they would have went to the wilderness and listened to the message that John the Baptist was proclaiming to the people, they would have understood that they need to go back to their text, specifically Isaiah 9 and 6, where it talks about who's coming and what he's bringing. So he says bringing the government. He didn't say he's going to come from the people that's already been established within the government. Isaiah 9 and 6 tells us the child is born and the son is given and the government will be on his shoulders. So the person that is coming through the woman, they're going to actually bring the government instead of submitting to the worldly system and the worldly government and the worldly traditions and the worldly ideologies and the worldly methodologies. And he's going to bring the kingdom of heaven back so that he can rule and reign on the throne of David that has no end. See, they were looking for someone, but history will always tell us what to expect. See, if they paid attention to the story of how King David was anointed king, they would have known that they would have known that their eyesight would have deceived them, would have swayed them instead of having them focused on the actual text. When they went to David's house and he was in the field shepherding the flock, the father went and got all of his sons and forgot about old David because he was filthy and stinky. He didn't look like the other brothers. And we fast forward into the New Testament, and yet still they were looking for the people who looked the part, sounded the part, were socially accepted, a political figure who everyone loved, instead of focusing on the main thing. But God chose a prophet clothed in camel's hair, crying out in the desert. The kingdom does not conform to human categories, to human regulations, or of influence or success. For disciples today, this passage challenges us to examine where we look for validation of God's work. Whew, that blessed me. Because it challenges us to shift our thinking. Because we go through life, especially in the ministerial circles, we seek to be validated by the religious leaders or the spiritual leaders in our congregation instead of being validated by the Father. I'm going to tell you this. I remember very early in my pastoral journey. It's actually about 2 years now, so very early. I guess it's still very early. I used to try to send stuff to people to get their opinion on a lot of different people. And I remember my wife, she asked me, she said, "Why are you trying to get an opinion from everyone else? Why? God has already called you. You're steady trying to get or be validated by other people." And I remember that to this day. I would never forget it. And ever since that moment, I stopped seeking validation from people and I go straight to the Father. I go straight to the Father. And when the Father tells me to do things, I don't need to get the opinion or the okay from the other people who's been doing this for a very long time. God has anointed me to do this thing, and I would do this thing for God and God alone. See, it's okay to get the opinion of people, but it's not okay to not listen to what God has already told you. I fell into that not okay part at the beginning. But I can tell you this, not again. I get validation from the Father. The Father and I have a relationship, and that relationship is very, very superior to the earthly relationships that we have. Do we equate the kingdom with visible power, prestige, or popularity? Or do we discern the kingdom in faithfulness, humility, and prophetic truth? John was more than a prophet because he pointed directly to the king. And you, too, are more than you think you are because the king is within you. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the in you part. And while John the Baptist was far greater than all of the prophets, we're going to talk about what Jesus said about you as it relates to John the Baptist. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all as always. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for the love. Thank you for it all. Until next time, peace.